This is a 60-inch round black walnut table. This is a coffee, the sweet elixir of life. It all starts with a sketch, so here we go. The table will be 60 inches around, 30 inches tall, and have a crisscrossing type base. The first step would be to take the rough cut lumber, cut it to length and width roughly the size that I need for the parts. Then run it on the joiner to square it and flatten it. This is a 12-inch joiner with two 40-inch in-feed and out-feed tables with an overall length of 7 feet. It's made by Power and Company, built in probably 1888. Someday I'd like to do a review on this joiner so that if anyone's interested, they can run out to Home Depot and pick one up. After the joiner, I take it to the planer, give it the correct thickness. There's a lot of parts in here, so I'm just showing you one or two, but there's a complete stack of lumber to be used for this job. The 24-inch planer was giving me a little bit of tear out on pieces here and there, so I thought I'd try out the 735 and see if that would work for me. The 735 gives me a very clean cut, and the trade-off is that you can't cut as deep each time, so it's a little slower. When gluing panels together, you have to get good coverage on the glue. Your entire surface must be glued. Any voids are just going to cause a weakness and a problem later. I use a brush to spread the glue out evenly on both sides of the joint and bring it together. This way there's no air gaps or openings that would cause weakness. You might ask why not use dominoes or biscuits to align each panel. And the simple answer is, I don't have either of those tools. I would also say that I tend to not even worry about using dominoes or biscuits because I'm confident with glue joints, and I'm also a little wary of having a biscuit or a domino hiding inside the wood, and you go to cut an edge or make a change to the design, and suddenly you're looking at a domino sticking out the side of your project. For wide panel glue ups, such as with this table, I will break it down into smaller glue ups of 3 or 4 pieces. Then I bring the 3 or 4 pieces together to complete the full panel. Doing it this way, I find it easier to get every joint flush and a flat panel overall. Here I'm using the hollow chisel mortising machine. Once the workpiece is clamped in, there are stops for the table, so you can roll left, right, and stop in a position each time. That really helps with repeatability, and in this case I've got many parts to make, all the same, so it's a nice reliable way to get the job done. I never thought I would need a hollow chisel mortising machine, and for years I just went without it. I would just drill a hole with the drill press and chisel it out by hand. But now that I've got it, I would never go back. When you don't have a machine, you don't think you need it necessarily. Then once you have it, you kind of can't live without it. This is the center post, which will pass through the cross pieces. Each end of it will need to be reduced in size so it can fit through the hole in the cross pieces. I'm using the table saw to create a series of curve cuts that I can then clean off with a chisel and speed up the whole process of removing the wood. It's always good to check the fit of your parts before you move on to the next step, which is what I'm doing here. Inserting the post into the cross pieces, double check that for fit, and then move on. I need to make mortises in the cross pieces to accept the angled pieces. Previously, in this case, I would use a drill press and take out some of the material with a drill and then finish it up with a chisel. But with the mortising machine, it simplifies and speeds up that whole process. Well, now it's time to cut the top to its final size. To do this, I've got the table top upside down. I've installed a threaded insert in the very center of the table, and then I connect my router jig to that with a 1/4 inch bolt. I drew a line in a circle all the way around and cut to that line, which was about 1/4 of an inch larger than the finished size. Doing that makes it easy to do the routing, because now your router is only just taking off 1/4 inch or even a little less as it goes around. This router uses a vacuum to extract a lot of the dust that builds up inside there. And so that normally that vacuum will be in your way, and you'll do a little cutting and then move the vacuum, etc. But in this case, I was able to put the vacuum directly on top of the jig and work my way around. It's pretty cool. You can't see the beads of sweat on my forehead, but believe me, this was a somewhat tense moment. At this point, I've put a lot of work into the tabletop, a lot of time and effort, and if I mess up, then all that work is lost. I'm routing this with 2 passes. First cut is about halfway through, and then the second cut finishes out. So I got to go around twice. Well, that's it. I'm really happy with this. There's no defects and I can move forward. Now it's time to put on a detailed edge on the tabletop. And again, I'll do this in 2 passes. The first one will take a portion of the cut. The second one is the final cut. This way you don't put too much stress on the wood as you go around. Sanding is an important part of the job, and sometimes it can take as much as all the work you've done up until that point. This is a new addition to the shop, the Powermatic 2244 drum sander. It has a great feature called feed logic, which slows down the feed rate if there's too much load on the drum. I haven't seen too many reviews online for this machine, so at some point I'd like to maybe do a review. If you'd like to see that, let me know in the comment section. I use steel threaded inserts for the levelers at the bottom of each cross piece. Gluing up this base is going to be very tricky and challenging. A whole lot of parts are coming together, all with glue. You don't want the glue to set up before you're finished. I need the top cross pieces to be parallel to each other in all directions, and that is really challenging. The top has 3 coats of varnish with a light sanding in between each layer. Once that's fully dried, I will wet sand with 800 grit, 1500 grit, and then 3000 grit. After that, I applied 2 coats of wax and buffed it out. Well, there it is, beautiful walnut table, 60 inches around. Really hope the customer likes it.